Welcome to Classical Greek Lesson 2. We'll begin this lesson by practicing the alphabet, which you met in Lesson 1. You'll probably find it handy to have a copy of the alphabet by your side while you do this. Here are 8 names. On the left we have 4 from Classical Greek, on the right 4 from New Testament Greek, all of them using the Greek alphabet. Take a moment now to pause the video and see if you can work out which names these are. You'll do this by turning each Greek letter into its English equivalent, but when you get to the end of some of the names, sometimes the spelling of the Greek name isn't quite how we'd spell it in English. By the time you get to the end, you'll probably work out which well-known characters I've chosen. Now I'm going to go over them. So, first of all, working through the names on the left, we have Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. Next, a name which, if I turn it letter for letter, I get Apollon, but in fact in English we'd call him Apollo. So that N on the end, well, I put brackets around it because we don't really use that in English. You noticed perhaps at the beginning of these names that there was this sign, this symbol, of a backward pointing tiny C just to the left of the letter. We call that a smooth breathing, and its purpose is to tell us that there is no aspiration on that vowel, there's no H sound on that vowel. Third name, probably easiest of the lot, Zeus, the king of the gods. Now, fourth name, did you notice that the breathing points forward? And that tells us that when we turn it into English, we begin with an H. And then taking the other letters in turn, we end up with the name Hermes, the messenger god. Well done if you got those 4 right. Now let's turn to the 4 on the right. And these are names which you find in New Testament Greek. Now, the first letter, it's got a smooth breathing, not before the vowel. The first vowel is an I. But as we continue through the letters, you're probably recognising the name Joseph there. Remember, there is no J in Greek, so an I was the closest equivalent. The second name is a Greek name, which means lover of horses, in fact. Philippos, if you take it letter by letter, or Philip, as it's most often known to us. Third name here is Michael, and the fourth name, taking it letter by letter, Lucas, which we more commonly write as Luke today. Now that you've refreshed your memory of the alphabet, let's look at your first bit of real Greek. Here's a collection of Greek words. They're all of them nouns, and they're all nouns in the same group. We would call that group a declension, a family of nouns. They all behave the same way. Each time we begin with the word ho. If you notice the breathing on the omicron, which tells you pronounce that as ho. And ho is the definite article, which means the. The first word is angelos. If you recall, the double gamma in Greek is pronounced as an ng in English. Angelos gives us the English word angel, but angelos doesn't mean angel, it means messenger. And I hope you can see the connection there, as an angel is a messenger of God. Look at the next one, and notice in particular the rough breathing over the initial iota, which tells you that we pronounce this word beginning with an H. Ho, hippos. Hippos is another word that comes into English. Ho, of course, means the, and hippos means horse. So if you consider hippodrome, for example, a horse running track, or the name Philippos, which actually means lover of horses, and hippopotamus, a river horse, all these words come from the Greek. Now, the next word, again, we have the. I'll read it to you. Strategos. Now, strategos, if you write it out in English letters, you can see easily is the root of the English word strategy. But it doesn't mean strategy, it means general, as in the leader of an army. Next one, ho didaskalos. Think about the English word didactic, which might help you, or might not, it's not a word we use very often. But didaskalos means the teacher. Next one, perhaps easier, the ho theos, the god. The next one, ho logos, the word. Now we can take these two Greek words together, combine them and make the English word theology, with the first part of the word, theo, coming from the Greek word for God, and logi coming from the Greek word for word. In fact, this word logos, which is very common in Greek, has got more than one translation. We can say word, but we can also say story or reason. It lies behind English word logic or logistics, and behind the English suffix logi, which we add to so many academic disciplines. Now, hodoulos, the slave. That one hasn't got any English word which comes from it, but it's a very frequently found Greek word, so I thought I would add it to your first list. At the end of the list, we have a name, which you can perhaps see from the capital Alpha, and this word is Alexandros, which is normally written in our language as the name Alexander. I added it to the list because we've got here a list of words, all with a definite article, the word the before them. Now, Greek tends to use the definite article before a name as well, which English never does. We wouldn't say the Alexander, not unless perhaps there were two or three of them. We say, oh, the Alexander who lives over there. We wanted to distinguish. But normally we don't put the with a name, but Greek does. And that's why I added that one to this list. Now it's time to move on to your first real bit of Greek grammar. We're going to look at verbs. First of all, we're going to look at verbs in the present tense. That's verbs which are translated as I'm doing it, you are doing it, and so on. Each Greek verb in the present tense is made up of two elements, and that is, first of all, the stem, which we see here marked out in black, and secondly, the ending, which we see in red. So the stem is going to be the same, whoever is doing the verb. The ending is going to change. But the great thing about these red verb endings is that they can be applied to any verb in the Greek language. So if I take, for example, one of the verbs below, let's take the verb angelo, which means announce. And you've already met the word angelos, which means a messenger. So it won't surprise you perhaps to know that angelo means I announced. Well, angelo is announced. Omega is the bit of the verb which tells you that I am announcing. But supposing I don't want to say I'm announcing, I want to say that you're announcing. Well, we'll get rid of that omega and we'll add the second person ending instead. And the second person, that is the you form of the verb, I can see from the table there, it is epsilon iota sigma. Angeles means you announce. And we can do the same with any of the other verbs. I can take the verb dioko, just below angelo on the list, which means I chase. And instead of putting an omega on the end, I'm going to put the omen ending. And I've made the Greek for we chase. Okay, so let's look at this model verb here. Pow is the stem, omega is the ending. Pow-o means I stop. And if you think of the English word pause, if you pause to do something, you stop, then that's where it comes from. If it has an omega on the end, it's I stop. But if it has the ending ace, then it's you stop. That's you singular. If it ends in a, then it's he stops, or she, or it. Somebody stops. Omen on the end is for we stop. Ete on the end tells you, again, you stop, but this time it's you plural, more than one person. And finally, the ending usi means they stop. Now you'll notice for this end, there's an extra letter in brackets, pausin. It may have a nu on the end. That nu is only used if the next word begins with a vowel, or if it's the last word in the sentence and the next thing is a full stop. Think in English that we speak about a pear, but an apple. You put an N before the word apple to make it easier to say. And that's the main reason why that nu is used. It's only there to make it easier to say. It's worth learning this table. You can learn by reciting pao, paoes, paoe, paomen, paoete, paousi. Or you could recite any of the other verbs with the same set of endings. So akuo, akues, akue is I hear, you hear, he hears. Think about the English word acoustic. Luo, lues, lue, I set free, you set free, he sets free. We meet that word in the English word analysis, strangely enough, which means breaking things up, setting them free, setting free an argument. Really, it's breaking up an argument. Or the word chase, dioko, diocase, diok, diocomen, diokete, diocusi. Let's look at the next three I've added. The word for write is grapho, and that comes into English in graphite, in a pencil, which we write with, or in the suffix graphy, like geography, which is there to mean it's writing about the earth. Pempo, I send. Didasco, I teach. We've already met the word didaskalos, which means teacher, so maybe it won't come as a surprise to me. Didasco means teach. Now, you can pause here or you can move on, but this is a slide you should be coming back to so that you really learn and memorise these endings. Now you've met some nouns and some verbs, and we're going to put some of them together in sentences. These are very simple sentences. One of them is only a one-word sentence. Let's give them a go. Ho angelos akue. Angelos, angel, messenger. This sentence means the messenger akue. Think acoustic, it's hears. You could write the messenger listens, and that would be correct as well. Next one. Ho strategos dioke. The strategos, strategy. The word means general. Dioke, chases, pursues. I haven't said in this sentence who or what he's chasing or pursuing. Maybe an army. Maybe the enemy. Graphomen, a one-word sentence. You don't need two words because the ending tells you who's doing the verb. The omen ending means we. Well done if you've learnt that already. Grapho, think graphite, graphy, we, write. You could put we are writing, by the way. That's a perfectly good translation. They're both equally good. Next one, ho theos, the God. If you're doing this as New Testament Greek quite often uses ho theos, where we would say God. So feel free to miss out the ho if you feel that that's appropriate. Didaske, didactic is your clue. The God teaches. Now the last sentence here hasn't got a definite article. There is no word for the. It just goes straight into the noun, doulos graphe. It looks as if it just means slave. Graphe, we had it earlier, writes, or you could say is writing. Now, slave writes isn't good English, but I can't say the slave writes because the Greek hasn't used the word the, so we can't put the in English. If there is no definite article, then you can put, and you should put, a in English, a or an. So no definite article before a noun, and your job is to write a or an. Now the grammar's going to get a little bit more sophisticated as our sentences become longer, and we will have 3 elements in each sentence: a subject, somebody who is doing the action, a verb, the action itself, and an object, another noun, who's on the receiving end of the action. Each sentence follows the same pattern. One of them is very slightly different to the others. Let's translate them. Ho didaskalos. Ho is the. Didaskalos, didactic, is our link word. Teacher. Didaske looks very similar. This is a verb which is connected to that noun, and it means teaches. And now we have a noun which might be familiar to you. We have met it in a form, in a spelling that is new to you. This word, if you've remembered that doulos means slave, then well done. This is the slave. So it's a slightly new form of the word the, and it's a new spelling on the end of slave. I'll underline those. We'll be seeing more of that pattern. Let's move on to the next one. Ho angelos. Perhaps that's getting familiar to you now. The messenger. Now a related verb, which tells you what messengers do. Announces. Now we see this same new form that we did in the sentence above, and like in the sentence above, it also means the. And again, we have an unusual spelling on the word which we're familiar with as logos, which means word or story or tale, account, reason. Let's go for story here. The messenger announces the story. Next one, the strategos, the general. Remember, the person who has a strategy. Sets free. And there is ton. Again, the. And the word for horse. Again, with that new on the end. The same pattern is emerging. Finally, diocase. I've given you a different person of the verb, this time to the one we normally have, and that's a you singular form of the verb, so you singular, chase, and again ton is the, angelon, the messenger. So what's going on here? Well, one thing that you may have noticed is that there are 2 different forms of the word the and 2 different spellings of these os nouns. One form of the article and one spelling of the noun is used when that noun is the subject of the sentence. That is, if it's doing the action, doing the verb. Another spelling of the noun, an alternative form of the, is used if the noun is the object of the sentence. That is, for example, if it's on the receiving end of the verb. You might say, the boy kicked a ball. In that sentence, the boy is the subject, the ball is the object. It's on the receiving end of the verb. We call these different forms of the noun and different forms of the article different cases. And the nominative case is the case used if that noun is the subject. The accusative case is a case used if that noun's the object. And this is something which will probably be familiar to you if you've studied another inflected language, such as Latin or German or Russian. We also get it in English, just occasionally. For example, in English, we use the word I for the subject of the sentence. For example, I see my friend. But we should use the word me for the object of the sentence. My friend sees me. We wouldn't say my friend sees I. So in English, I is a nominative form and me is an accusative form. The only snag is that, one, we don't tend to use these words in English grammar, so most people don't grow up knowing them. And secondly, rather more worryingly perhaps, people often get them wrong and use the pronouns wrongly, which doesn't really help. Now this pattern that you've learnt here, those nouns which end in os, which all change to on for the accusative, who have a definite article ho, which changes to ton in the accusative. This group of nouns is called the second declension, the second group. You might have thought it odd for me to start with the second group when I could have started with the first, but the second declension is a little bit more straightforward, a little bit easier, so I thought we'd begin with those. But it's time now to look to the first declension, and I think you'll see certain similarities. Now, first declension nouns also have a definite article, and they have a nominative form and they have an accusative form. And just like second declension nouns, the nominative form is used for the subject of the sentence, and the accusative is used for the object of the sentence. The word for the is hair in the nominative, or 10 in the accusative. And that remains the same for all first declension nouns. What makes them a little bit more complicated than the second is that some first declension nouns end with an eta, the letter we pronounce air, and they have their accusatives n, and some end in an alpha, like this one here, Sophia, and they have their accusative an. In fact, the overall format is the same. They both have a new on the end, that's this letter here in the accusative case, and that's the letter which we also saw in the second declension as well. So there's no change there. Let's have a look at the meanings of these new words. Now the word timer here means honour, which was something which meant so much to the Greeks that it's a word that you see a lot in ancient Greek. Sophia, which has been adopted into not only English but many languages as a girl's name, means wisdom. And in words such as philosophy, the sophi suffix of that word means wisdom. So philosophy means love of wisdom. Now here are 6 more words which belong to the first declension, 3 of them ending in an eta and 3 of them in an alpha. First of all, Nike. You may have recognised that I put the emblem of the sportswear company Nike there at the side, and next to it a statue of the goddess Nike, the goddess Victory. So Nike means victory, a suitable name, I think, for a sportswear company to adopt. Then we have epistolaire, letter, the origin of our word epistle. Boer means shout. Not the verb, to shout, but the noun, a shout, something that you might hear if you're out on the battlefield. Ecclesia means assembly, or at least in classical Greek it means assembly, a gathering, such as a political assembly. But in New Testament Greek, this meant the church, the assembly, the gathering of the faithful. And that is therefore the origin of our word ecclesiastical. Hemera means day. A butterfly is said to be ephemeral because it lives only for the day. And if you remember that theos, the origin of theology, which meant God, then you won't be surprised to see thea. Same word but different ending, feminine version, meaning goddess. More words to learn. Now that you've met several new words, let's practice some more sentences, mixing up the second declension nouns that you learnt earlier with the first declension nouns that you've just met, and adding some of the verbs that we've already seen. It's a good idea to practice reading these ones aloud. I'll read them for you, but if you want to get in there first, then stop the video and have a go, and then I'll read it for you. And it's important to do that reading aloud so that you gain fluency. Even just hearing the Greek in your head will help you to feel more at home with the language. So the first one. Ho strategos akue ten boen. The general, think strategy if you want to remember that word. Here's, remember acoustic, the shout. Now the second one. Ho didaskalos graphe logon. The teacher writes. Now there is no word for the here, so I'm not going to say the word, I will say a word. And remember, I could say story or tale there instead. Number 3. He thea didaske ten Sophian. The goddess teaches. Now, it looks as if I should say the wisdom, but that doesn't quite look like good English. And it's a little bit like what we saw with Ho Alexandros. Remember that? With names, Greek likes to use a definite article even though we don't usually use it in English. Same goes for abstract nouns. With abstract nouns, the wisdom, sometimes we use an article in English, but more often than not we don't. So it's fine when you're translating it to miss out the article if you wouldn't normally use it in English. So a good translation of the third one is the goddess teaches wisdom. But don't be surprised that you see the article in Greek. Last one. Ho doulos angelei ten niken. And when you read that, well done if you got the ng sound there for the double gamma. The slave announces the, I think, Nike sportswear company comes from the Greek word which means victory. You've met a lot of new Greek in this lesson, and you may be feeling a little daunted by just how much new you've taken on board. If that's the case, then pause, replay some of it. Take a bit of time to write out the new grammar you've met, in particular the 6 person endings of the verbs, o, ace, a, omen, ete, usi, and the nominative and accusative case endings of nouns. We've met 2 types. We've met the first declension, which would end in er or a, and we've met the second declension, which end in os. Remember, we met those first. We practiced several sentences, and you've met quite a bit of new vocabulary, some of which is similar to English, some of which isn't similar at all. So it's worth taking a bit of time to consolidate this new vocabulary before moving on to the next lesson. But before we go, we just have a small quiz for you. Here are the names of 4 characters from Greek mythology and pictures, one to go with each name. Pause the video and see if you can work out which picture belongs with each name. I am now going to give you the answers. The first name here we have is Agamemnon, and that belongs with a picture here which shows the gold funeral mask of Agamemnon, which Schliemann, the German 19th century archaeologist, famously excavated at Mycenae. Okay, next name I'll take is Poseidon, and that belongs to this statue here of the god of the sea with his trident, his signature weapon. Then let's take Artemis, goddess of hunting and of the moon, and here she is with her arrows and her stag. And that just leaves this chap here. This is Odysseus. Odysseus, who suffered many setbacks on his long journey home from Troy, one of which was the threat of the sirens. Here he is in a Roman mosaic, in his boat, tied to the mast, as he was the only one in the crew allowed to hear the call of the sirens, but it was so persuasive that he was tied to the mast, because if he hadn't been, he would have jumped out of the ship to his certain death. A little bit of mythology to end your second lesson.